So welcome, Elder Sylvia, our beloved visionary colleague. We so appreciate all that you do for so many in our community. And as always at Setsi, we acknowledge our creator. We acknowledge all the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation, all those whose bones whose lie at the bottom of the transatlantic. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts, whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Elder Sylvia, please share your remarkable story with us and introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, I think it's lovely that I get to situate myself as well. So I would have my identity in terms of being African Nova Scotian, and am very appreciative of being here in Mi'kma'ki, European naming in terms of Nova Scotia for the context of folks, in the city known as Halifax, but in terms of its rooted name in First Nation, Chibuktuk. And I am pleased to be able to be part of an organization that continues to model and value the importance of situating community voices and voices. So here at Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute, where we are located and work and play and try to grow and contribute to reconciliation, is where I am. Our work is around engaging for research and for education, all Afrocentric, so centering and focused in that way. And yeah, so thank you. I don't know if folks how clearly showing my background is, but I did want to take an opportunity to do, as we need to do, is recognize our positioning here based on being able to stand on those who came before us. In this particular piece of work around Viola Desmond and her honor, Mayanne Francis, is kind of not recent in terms of being done, but recent in terms of talking about and valuing the acknowledgements of someone who in 1946 took a stand and made a decision, and in someone who was able to bring her social justice voice and movement forward. So a lot in terms of an introduction, but a valuing in terms of who we are, what we're about, and that history is not just in our past, it is in our past to learn from and to bring forward and to grow. And so I thought this was symbolic of that way of being.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate your candor and all that you do for so many. We give thanks. We give thanks. We give thanks. So what my second question is, what inspires you most about your work? What has you passionate about writing? What has you curious?
I love that question. Thank you. So because we have a chance to help folks go back and look at where our grounding is in our traditions and way of being in terms of being Afrocentric, that's a real passion piece for me. The intergenerational way we are about that and having youth voices lead in what we do is another passion piece for me. So we are able to, in our kind of centering way as a hub and connecting out, able to be part of what I hope is transformative for people as individuals, for our communities as a collective, and for the work that we do kind of around policy change. So like a number of people may do, when I rise up as early as I can in the morning, and bring spirit and prayer into my life to start my day, and think about kind of the blessings and the gifts that I have a chance to share, that I may be seen as owning, but to also benefit from others. Those are my kind of inspiration and inspiring spaces. And you know, those are integrated in storytelling and in sharing. So I'm very appreciative of my location of work that values storytelling, that takes time for people to come into a space and to share in the way that works for them and is of value to them, while at the same time being able to, because of the work that I do here with our team and our team leads around research, being able to take that knowledge and say, what change can we activate with that, right? So really, like, you tell your story in the way that is most comfortable for you and do things in the way that makes sense. we can hear them authentically in that way, and we can also build from them to create the spaces for change.
I couldn't agree more. Ashe, ashe, ashe. We are people of oral tradition and griots and storytellers and narrative builders and creators. And I think that it's so important that we find ways and means to mobilize knowledge, knowledge mobilization, and knowledge translation. So once again, I give thanks for your candor and your leadership. So my next question is, what challenges and barriers do you and your colleagues face, and what are some of the approaches you're taking to overcome them?
Yeah. So it might sound a bit cliche, but challenges are opportunities for us, right? And so when we see, for example, we're not a huge province, but we're large enough to have our own uniqueness. So a rural community perspective is unique from a urban community's perspective, right? So the idea about having access to resources that are accessible in multiple ways, terms of it's readable, it has a knowledge that is, you can turn it into learning and growth moments. So the opportunities are for us to build and to grow more resources that can be used in the public school system. It can be used in our communities. Telling our history, sharing our contributions is so important for pride in ourselves. So because knowledge can feed into pride, but also so that other folks can benefit, but should know these things. The opportunity to figure out how do we work collaboratively together for resourcing, financial resourcing, human resourcing. So those things exist for us that cross that continuum of challenge to opportunity. I would say as well, in terms of, again, depending on the lens, challenge or opportunity to view, is this idea about identity and uniqueness of identity. So as I started a little bit in my self-introduction, I identify as African Nova Scotian. We're a distinct people here in Mi'kma'ki in Nova Scotia because of our longevity and because of the journeys that brought us here. We value the contributions of those who came in different waves in different times. And we really want the province to see that as a strength piece that we collectively do together. So that is a bit of a different way of thinking. So our worldview in terms of Afrocentricity stands on the value of Ubuntu, which is my success and your success, and in the importance of humanities. We most recently came more into that conversation of that as we were engaged with folks from South Africa, where it's one of the rooted places for it. But it's been something that we've been building around. So that in terms of a value piece and our worldview of collectiveness, being communal, and in a place where we have been had our learning in terms of academics and schooling in a Eurocentric framing, sometimes we need to kind of remind ourselves about where we're actually rooted, that we're rooted in collectiveness, and think about that all that we do is about that, and all that we do is about value each other. So some of our challenges show up that as we interact with systems that aren't necessarily weaned on our worldview values, it takes time to have the good conversations and to contribute to change. But we do all kind of embrace all of those as opportunity moments for change.
I couldn't agree more, and I love that piece around challenges and opportunities, and I agree completely. It builds grit, it builds resilience.
Yeah, I love grit. That's such a big thing that's being talked about now. I was on podcasts, listen to podcasts from different folks, and grit in terms of women taking their leadership places in spaces, Black women, just to emphasize that, taking their leadership spaces, times of kind of pushing back in terms of academic rigor, what that's about. So yeah, so I'm hearing more about that word, grit.
Absolutely. And when we're navigating colonial mindsets, colonial constructs, and systems that are rooted in not just capitalism, but imperialism, we have to we have to have grit, we have to be resilient, and we have to have that principle of Kujichagulia, self-determination. People are powerful and mighty, and we've never given up, never given in. So I just give thanks for all that you've done for so many. Once again, we appreciate you. So my next question
Victor,
is, do you
you
have a
as
set of
well.
key priorities right now in your work?
Yeah, not that are evolving or new. So they're gonna find, people that know us, know what we do, will have heard these over the multiple years. So we just last year celebrated our 10th anniversary, right? And then said, thank you, Victor, thank you for that celebration. So in that celebration of the 10th anniversary, it was also a time for us not to just like in that Sankofa way to look back, but in the application of the Sankofa way to look back and take into this current time and imagining into the future what we want to do, what we want to build on. And so coming into this season of time, which in November it really marked our full year of acknowledging our 10 years, was about growth, right? And so growth in terms of the reach of the organization, geographically, the reach of the organization in terms of communities to impact. And so that means we need to continue to use the research that is so important in ways that kind of show up in multiple impacts. So we need to use the research to continue to value our community voices. And so that any stories, which would be qualitative data, any of those stories that we hear are important for our learning, right? And so we've gone around to places across the province and we've talked about this kind of hear, see, count data. So it's like, this is the way we can hear from community. Also kind of knowledge translation of those learnings that we have. So how quickly can we get them out? We're really growing our social media arm of things because a lot of folks across age bands involve in that and learn from that in that way. So we utilize that as well. And kind of deep, the deep kind of research, I guess, that organizations or government bodies will take up and use as policy change, that's continual for us. So that is longevity in it. So we're doing that as well. So as we grow, we are also imagining, so what did we learn? What needs to happen some more? So we've been asked to think about how we expand Afrocentric programming. We're not necessarily labeling that, Victor, in a particular way, but there have been conversations about Afrocentric school. There's been conversations about kind of within our institute, various sub-institutes that can focus on community learning and academic learning. So we are definitely about growth and about outreach, and yet not losing our focus about how we do that in a collective community way. So what's the proverb in terms of, so if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. African proverb. I love to be learning our proverbs in a better way that we can actually name the country that's associated with, but I have to say in broader continental naming, an African proverb that is a good place to build on.
Absolutely. There's an Akan proverb from West Africa, specifically in Ghana. And the
Okay.
proverb is wo nsa damua. Wo nsa damua. If your hand's in the dish, if you're doing the work. And I think when I hear that from my elder, Emmanuel Mele's, God bless him, we've been working on this healing and reconciliation work within our communities.
Mm-hmm.
All the times we're navigating very colonial, competitive frameworks in terms of resource acquisition. And my colleague in the Indigenous community calls the Hunger Games.
And
a lot of
yeah, but we like to talk about here, sorry, but like to talk here, like this messaging of scarcity, like, and it's so easy to be drawn into that, but there is never scarcity. There is always abundance. And it's like, and I'm not just talking dollars, although dollars fall into the abundance. I'm just talking that there's abundance of people have gifts. And if we just give the space for them to share those gifts, right? And if we're comfortable with being vulnerable with each other, these are things that to me are part of that understanding about living with abundance, and abundance mindset as well, right?
I couldn't agree more. That's why we built this platform, to create a dynamic where the intellectual property, or as I like to say, the intellectual abundance of our community can be shared. A lot of times there's a lack of awareness of the individuals. There's always, well, we don't realize that the ecosystem is built up of people and stories and narratives. And unless we find those 3 R's, relationships, resources, and reciprocities, we can't even see the abundance that's ever flowing, ever existent, ever present. So I give thanks for you once again for giving us that wisdom of that just we have to let go of these scarcity mindsets. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for that.
No, it's and we kind of realize that when the more conversations that we have and the kind of grace that we have in these conversations as well. Lots of times we need grace for ourselves as well as grace for the people that we're kind of talking with. And the advantage of me still having this like kind of background, reflecting back to me also makes me kind of remember and think about this idea about collective and support and pulling up. And so I mentioned her honor, Dr. Mayanne Francis, and not so visible, I think, behind my head here in this is, Dr. Casey Monroe Anderson, who was part of the work that we did around the Viola Desmond talk series and the value of the whole Viola Desmond and telling of her story. But I feel like it's appropriate now in this part of our conversation to talk about Dr. Casey Monroe Anderson as well, in this context about kind of mindset and positive mindset and go forward mindset, because there is, as we've recognized, resilience and resistance that we all need to have as communities kind of over time. Within that is not to miss an understanding and appreciation of accountability, right? And so in our recognition and gifting of involvement, having people have space for their narratives about where they're at is I think another gift of helping people walk into and hold on to accountability. And in these kind of dialogues that happen between Her Honor, Dr. Mayanne Francis, and Dr. Casey Monroe Anderson, Dr. Casey Monroe Anderson carried through all of our series, which was a four-part series, but was launched with that initial conversation. So I think this thinking about how do we kind of not just understand Eurocentric and Afrocentric in terms of kind of in a versus way. In fact, what I feel like is more beneficial is to think about things in a continuum way, particularly for those who are living and associated with our growth and our time in the Western context, right? So I think kind of acknowledging those pieces and being aware of them helps us not fall into any kind of spaces where we don't want to be in terms of replicating them, unintentionally. So I think this idea about having deeper into the being Afrocentric in our world, bringing out our Afrocentric worldviews is a really kind of important thing, and think about from the benefit side of things. So we kind of got this opportunity of bicultural, right, or bi worldview understandings, and so we're advantaged in the point about we can speak to all of those components with authenticity, right? So let's use that voice and that knowledge in a way that builds from needing to reshape the stories so that they're fuller, but also building our own stories forward.
I couldn't agree more. We found that in our work around healing and reconciliation within our community, that the need for accountability and then tempering that with radical empathy, grace, compassion, mercy for each other. And I think when we look at African-centered worldviews, it's so challenging sometimes for our people, especially organizational leaders, because of how even just the continent of Africa is framed. A lot of times my colleagues use the term emerging markets. I'm like, Africa's not an emerging market, it's the original markets.
Yes, thank you.
Think about developing nations. I'm like, you mean extracted nations?
Yeah. I mean, we just have to drop the name Lucy, right?
Undeveloped nations extracted from nations, So a lot of times it's so hard for us to balance that, because we think that an African-centered worldview is not futuristic. It's not, it's in the past, when actually African-centered worldviews are the only way that'll lead us out of climate crisis. I mean, indigenous worldviews are the only way that'll steward the land. There's so many
that is
worldviews
right.
that are casted aside. And I think when we think about reconciliation and repatriation and reparations, or just models to censor justice, access, inclusion, diversity, and equity, we have to kind of reverse our mindset from scarcity to abundance, from those worldviews being backwards and old to no, these are actually worldviews that are backed by principles and values that protected people, planets, and still created resources. So
yeah.
So yeah, I give thanks for your candor and leadership as always. It's always incredible talking with you.
Thank you, Victor. And you make me think as well about, like, again, kind of thinking from the aspect of research here that we hold up. It's this thing too about some of it has its, I don't know, basics the word, but I'll use it in terms of like just thinking about things like and kind of bringing back reflective questions when people say some things. And this is what I heard in some of the things that you just had shared, because it kind of comes to, well, how could that be? How could it be that we don't know something that has its foundation and its learning for us in the continent when we know that that's where our basic origins are from, right? How could it be that the use, the ability to understand the best ways to make use of land in terms of crops, the best way to make use of minerals in terms of what they do, have been with us? What has become the challenge with those, or what we see show, is when folks have come and wanted to abuse those, or wanted to make sole profit of those, and we're not communal, because that's the other thing in terms of value, like reciprocity, as you mentioned. We're not going to do something here that is only going to benefit an individual or us. We are not, that is not our values, and we don't live those values in that way in terms of how we are as staff teams who work together, and as a board in terms of a not-for-profit governance structure, right? We're not, that is not how we're going to be. It has to be, so how are we all moving forward because of this particular things that we're doing? And don't you think that embracing those values fully is best for the world? They don't just work in my home family. They don't just work in my work family. They work for the world when we embrace it, because if we're caring about each other and behaving and doing things in a way that, for you, Victor, I want it to be the best for you, and you're saying I want it to be the best for you, then that's how we're all going to be having the best, because we're about that for each other. So in some ways it feels, like I said, basic, simplistic, not sure what the right word is, but I also don't want to come off sounding like I'm naive and haven't been in places where I've had to experience how you strategically look in terms of policy work, and how you are active about responding to systemic racism, and how you are deliberate and intentional with addressing issues that are against the various markers of our identity, our ability, our gender, our race, our faith. Like, so I don't want to sound like not naive that those things don't need to be managed and thought about. What I want to kind of message about and advocate for, the importance of values and grounding, and how if we act from our values, we're going to get it right. It may not happen right tomorrow, but it's going to be right.
Shay, I couldn't agree to drop another proverb. Ubuntu, I am because we are. And that
yes.
simple premise, I am because we are, is in every monotheistic religion, every culture. Are you your brother or sister's keeper? Are you colleagues? Like it's about seeing and believing that you are part of a whole, and your interdependence, and not an individualistic scarcity mindset. So once again, I give thanks for your leadership. So this is my second last question. What is your ultimate goal? What does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
That is such a rich, challenging question. And I'm not even calling that an opportunity question. I'm calling that a challenging question. Because success is so personal, for one, right? But, we want to ensure that the folks who come to us as learners across the spectrum, and who are in learning systems are really valued and being engaged in learning in a way that represents them. So they're seeing people in front of them that look like them, that have an appreciation of the communities in which they engage in which they come from. So success would be to have increase those numbers of Black educators in various spaces, right? Because that's one of the things that we're working on now in terms of striving and thriving in that regard. It would be wonderful to know that we've gotten the message out to folks that while we're talking about Afrocentricity and centering on ourselves, that is about a focus. It's not about exclusion. So let's talk in a model that says we understand we have focus places to be in terms of doing things, but that is not exclusionary, or it is not dismissing various perspectives that are out there and various ways of worldview and being. We do have explicit kind of conversations about what is pushing up against values, as we talked about already in terms of Eurocentric and that, because there's a framing there that does position one better than the other. So we're not engaging in those kinds of conversation. So also for success for us would be for this valuing of what we do around the research work and focus from our community, and be able to see that has an opportunity to maybe scale up and influence the broader and larger society, because we do have something to offer, right? The values and the ways that we're doing are something to be considered and taken up. And then I guess the other thing about success, I guess just really translates from the mission and the values that we have. So we're to have spaces that provide we want to contribute to the development of spaces that provide genuine opportunities for people to learn and to grow and to bring their best selves into it. So right now we contribute to intervention programs and projects. We would like that the learning from those interventions be able to be incorporated into quote unquote everyday life for folks. If we're talking about kids in the public school system, and if we have kind of an intervention piece that is happening outside of the regular school day, we would like the learnings from that to go into the regular school day, so that when they come into the start of their day, they can feel the same recognition and value that they felt in whatever those programs were that they experienced directly with us, or that we've done in collaboration with folks. So I think those are our immediate thinking, if you will, or at least close to immediate thinking in terms of kind of what success might look like. But I will add on to, I do say it needs to be identified from the folks that we are charging ourselves to support. They need to tell us as well, this is what we see as success. And Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute, DBDLI, this is what we would hope you can do, or we want you to do to contribute to that happening.
Hey, Ashe. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or a call to action for our listeners and our viewers?
I think I think a call to action would be around kind of voice and situating voice. And so kind of in multiple perspectives. So one is that we seek to find spaces where we allow people, empower people to be able to, in a safe and brave way, speak for themselves, right? I also would like it in the sense about whom we're working with to help transformation happen, that people get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and we can have a dialogue about like kind of what didn't work in that conversation for me and why it didn't work. And rather than like, well, here's what I meant. So if we could leave off, here's what I meant, here's what my intent was, and just hear what people are saying to each other, I think that's a real opportunity for growth and for change. So I would ask people to take up the opportunity to be in a space in these conversations that are around race, equity, diversity, gender conversations, and to just hear what the person who is in that space as racialized, gendered, and so on, to have their voice heard, and to hear that, to listen, to understand, assuring that you're not just listening for your time to come into the conversation, but you're active listening to understand and to hold off onto, well, my intention was, right? That is often a turning space that messages to someone they're not really being heard. And the last piece that I'll say about voice is in an intergenerational way to find ways to really hear youth voice. It's so important that we take elder wisdom and that we value that, and that we acknowledge eldership in terms of qualities, criterias that have age as a component, but not as the only component. And so that shows up different in different communities and in different ways, but that someone who has come along on that journey and gotten that far needs to be acknowledged for that journey in terms of chronological years, and also the learning that they took with them. The hearing of the youth voice is like to be able to kind of hold ourselves in a way that we're not comparing about how we did it before or how that may not work, but allow that space for the youth to kind of, some of the phrases with that is safe to fail. So, things like that, so that we can kind of go into a futuristic way to poach onto your word as well, in kind of aspects that I could not envision. I'm going to hear from youth, young folks in my age in terms of rank. That's random, right? That's got a span on it, but I know that I have things to offer, and I'm content with that. I just need to make the space for the folks who are learning and coming along and learning and doing things in different way, that youth and young adults, then let's also make the space so that we can hear that again in an active listening way and kind of go forward with support.
Thank you so much. Ashe, ashe, ashe. I so appreciate all the words of wisdom and actionable insights and your consistent commitment to community development and your visionary leadership. So once again, we give thanks, Elder Sylvia, for all that you do for so many. Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank
And
you so much for this conversation. I love it. It feels energizing for me. Thank you.
Indeed. And we'll close this interview the way we began, by acknowledging our creator, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all those whose bones lie at the bottom of the transatlantic, all those that said freedom or death. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts, whose shoulders we stand on. We build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Brasi Papa, thank you, our beloved elder. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.